It's with great pleasure that I welcome back Dr. Sean Patel, who's the CEO and founder of Prep Expert, the title sponsor of the College Admissions Process podcast. Sean, you have a special message for the listeners?
Hey, John, I just wanted to mention for all the parents and students who are listening to this great podcast, we have a really special offer only for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast for Prep Expert. So if your student is going to be taking an online SAT, ACT, PSAT course anytime soon, or is looking for one-on-one tutoring with top 1% tutors, head over to prepexpert.com. We offer live online courses for every college admissions exam. On top of that, we have the best score guarantees, best curriculum, and best instructors in the test prep industry. And just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast, you can get 20% off any online SAT or PSAT or ACT course, as well as one-on-one tutoring. So you can get 20% off. Just make sure you use the promo code College Talk. That's one word, College Talk, and you'll get 20% off just for listeners of the College Admissions Process podcast. And I hope you guys can use that to your advantage, save a bunch of money at prepexpert.com.
Thank you so much, Sean. And to everyone out there, once again, that promo code is College Talk. That's one word, College Talk. Thank you all, and best wishes. Welcome to The Cap, where we are here to speak with college reps and other professionals in the field of college admissions to help answer all your questions and guide you through every step of the process. So if you're serious about college admissions, you've come to the right place. Are you ready? Let's talk about it. And now, here's your host, Dr. John Durante. Welcome to The Cap, the College Admissions Process podcast. I am your host, John Durante, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you today Heather Daniels, who's the Executive Director of Admissions at Colorado State University. Heather, it is so great to finally have you on the podcast. How are you today?
I'm great, John. Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here and so excited that you asked me to share a little bit about Colorado State.
Well, we're equally as thrilled to have you here and looking forward to hear all about CSU and the great things that it has to offer. So for those who may not be as familiar, Heather, can you start by giving us an overview of Colorado State and what makes it stand out among other major public research universities?
Yes, I love this question because I like to be able to talk about CSU from a very general perspective and then sort of dig in to exactly what you just wanted to know is what makes it different and special. So Colorado State University, we're located in Fort Collins, Colorado, which is about 1 hour north of Denver, about 1 hour south of the Wyoming border, so up in the northern part of the state, nestled up against the foothills to the Rocky Mountains. So in this just like pretty fantastic part of the country. So location-wise, I'll be able to dig into that a little bit more. But CSU, we're a land-grant institution here in Colorado, and so we exist to provide access to higher education, serving of course, our residents of Colorado, and then really the entire world. Our one institution, CSU, was founded as an ag school, so we have these really deep roots in the College of Agricultural Sciences, which again, hopefully I'll have a chance to chat a little bit about that. But then also unbelievable programs in engineering and business, pretty unique program in our College of Natural Resources. And then our College of Liberal Arts has more majors than any of our other colleges. So we have really something for everyone here at CSU.
So you mentioned about your mission in terms of serving the great people of the state of Colorado. Are there any institutional priorities in terms of the percentage of students that you're permitted to accept from outside of the great state?
Yeah, definitely. What's interesting about kind of all of that, so as a land-grant institution, before I came to CSU, I wasn't as familiar with land-grant schools, and I didn't know as much about the history of a land-grant institution. And now I've been here at CSU for about 13 years, and I bleed it. I believe in it. I love it. And it really is sort of our driving force. And so much of our commitment to our organizational goals is rooted in our land-grant mission. And so we exist to provide access to higher education for Colorado residents. And so that is sort of first and foremost, when I think about our institutional goals, is how are we best serving the state of Colorado? And then you sort of balance in that other piece of how we attract students coming from outside of the state of Colorado. So within the state, we do have some sort of state mandated requirements of the percentage of students that we can have from in state Colorado versus out of state. And I think that number lands at about 55% of our students have to be from the state of Colorado, 45% can come from outside. We don't even really come close to that, which is kind of nice. We're in this really nice balance where we're always looking to increase our non-resident population, but not at the expense of serving our Colorado residents.
Well, we appreciate that insight. And you talk about the fact that you're a land grant institution. And so the mission emphasizes access, service, and real world impact. So, Heather, how do students experience this mission in daily campus life, both academically and socially? And for applicants, what's the best way to reflect an understanding of this mission in their applications? And if you don't mind, how important is it, to show that they understand that mission?
Okay, yeah, that's a great question. When I think about the land grant mission, it's something certainly as a student, I think our students feel when they're on our campus. I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more, but I did want to touch on what that looks like from the admissions perspective, because I think it's something, as I mentioned, it's sort of a driving force behind a lot of the work that we do. And one of those things is providing access to the admissions process, how we work with students throughout the entire process. We're constantly sort of revisiting the different steps and thinking, is this working? Is it working for our students? Is it working for our partners in the high schools? We've evaluated our review process, letters of recommendation, test scores, kind of every aspect of the admissions process. And our lens has always been providing access. And so trying to eliminate those barriers and really trying to make CSU accessible for students. We did something 2 years ago, I think it was, where we eliminated the application fee for all of our Colorado residents. And so the state of Colorado has already been participating in something called free application days. So for a few days in the month of October, all of the students in the state of Colorado can apply to all of the colleges in the state of Colorado for free. And so we'll continue to participate in that event. That's when a lot of the Coloradans are applying for admissions. But we were like, now let's back it up and let's make this accessible for our Colorado population all the time. So we're fee-free every day. So that's something that we do kind of on the very front end of things.
Well, we really appreciate that. And who doesn't love a free application? So, one of the things that the students and families listening, they want to hear more about this thing that we call the holistic admissions process, Heather. So, what are the key factors your team considers when reviewing applications? And how do you balance academic achievement with other aspects of the overall student's profile?
Definitely. That's such a great question. And I love you asking these questions of all the schools because I feel like every school can answer it a little bit differently. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit as it relates to test scores. But the way I like to talk about holistic review is that first and foremost, the most important aspect of a student's application is going to be their academic profile, right? Like we are looking at students that are applying to attend our institutions, and every school across the country wants to enroll students who are going to be academically successful. So how that's defined on each campus will definitely vary a little bit, but really at the meat of that, that's their academic profile, how they've done in their classes, the kinds of classes that they've taken, and so forth. Now, can pretty much be narrowed down to a GPA that could be weighted or unweighted, and it could be a list of classes. And it's really very important, but it's only sort of this piece of the puzzle. And that's where I feel like the holistic review comes in, and it adds this like other context to a student's story. And that's what I love, is that you can take other things into consideration. So that B in a class sophomore year might have some meaning behind it, the type of class that it was, what was happening for the student during that particular semester, how that compares to other grades that they would have received. So that holistic review, in my opinion, gives us a chance to not just sort of look at a template and say, okay, check these boxes. It actually gives us a chance to kind of look under the hood a little bit more and take other things into consideration and marry that with the academic profile.
Well, we really appreciate that. And I love the example that you gave in terms of giving context into why you may have had a lower grade, let's say in ninth or 10th grade. Have you ever seen a student use the additional space effectively to bring clarity into situations like that? And could you share, how they approach that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, definitely. I love that because this to me is a piece of advice that I would give to students and to parents and counselors is that if there is that thing, whatever it is, a lower grade, an absence, disciplinary, whatever it might be, talk about it, share. Because as you're reviewing an application, if you see sophomore year, there's a change in grades, then the question is, what was going on? Something might have been going on. And so without having that understanding from an explanation, then it's harder to make a decision about that. It's harder to not justify, but sort of explain, okay, this is how a student could still be successful. Going back to something I had said earlier about kind of always looking at our process and how we can just continue to refine it. A few years ago, we added a question to our application, and our intention was to address exactly what you're asking. So tell us about this one piece of your application. But unfortunately, we didn't phrase it in the best way. So we said, tell us a little bit about your academic profile. Well, we got, you name it, the kinds of responses to that sort of a question. Helpful, but we're like, no. We actually want it to match something that a student's like, hey, here's your chance to address something that's not what you particularly like about your academic profile. So the way we've fine-tuned that question, I feel like it's been great. It's inviting to a student, and I feel like they feel comfortable being able to explain those types of situations to us. So I think it's a really great thing. And if somebody doesn't have a response or doesn't have an explanation or doesn't have that moment in their transcript or throughout their high school, then that's okay. Then there's nothing to add there.
Well, I think that's extremely clever in terms of how your team approached that issue. And I want to break down the rest of the application as well, because so many students and families, this is what they really want to hear about. So, strong letters of recommendation, for example, and personal statements can really bring an application to life. In your experience, Heather, what makes these components really stand out? And can you share an example of one that really left a lasting impression on your team?
Yeah. Oh, that's honestly, the essays and the letters of recommendation are my favorite part of the application, which seems contradictory to what I was saying earlier about the academic profile being so important. But to me, that's really kind of using your words, what brings life to a student's application. Transcripts, although I would love for them to be a little bit more standardized across districts and states and so forth, it really is a sort of like a templated example. You see a student's grades, it's written out semester by semester, class by class with the letter grade calculated. In a lot of ways, it's pretty not generic because, of course, the content's really important, but what you see is sort of like this grid, right? Test scores, kind of the same thing. You've got your multiple test scores added together. But the essay, that's the student's story. And the recommendation, that's the teacher or the counselor sharing their perspective of the student. And so it sort of brings it all together for a student. And that's where I feel like it really gets into the meat of who that person is and how they'll contribute to campus. So for students, the things that stick out for me are the student stories that are authentic. And you can tell when they're authentic. When someone's telling their personal story, I've sat on a lot of panels where admissions folks will say, don't write about the things that we all read about. And I always contradict that. And I say, no way. If that service trip or that injury or whatever it might be is a part of your story, tell us that story. So even though we might have read that a million times, it's on us to say, for this student that we're reading this application, this is their story. This is what they want to tell to us. So I often will advise students to not stay away from certain topics. Talk about what you care about. Talk about what's going to tell a review committee a little bit about you beyond what they're going to see in a transcript. And I think for the recommendations, of course, it's important. I hope this goes without being said, but, ask a teacher or counselor who's going to write something positive about you. Sometimes those are the ones that stand out to me. It's like, why did this student ask this teacher to write this letter of recommendation when they didn't show up to class every day or whatever it might be? So, being really intentional about who you ask to write letters of recommendation, and probably most importantly, giving them time to submit that letter of recommendation, knowing that teachers and counselors are busy during the academic year. And so making sure that they have enough time to commit to writing the letter, and then they know when the deadlines are and how they need to submit that letter.
Well, we appreciate that. And I love how you talked about the typical essays. You mentioned injuries, which we've heard many times before, particularly sports injuries. But you
Yes.
also mentioned service trips, which I know so many students do throughout their time in high school. So, one of the pieces of recommendations that we give to students is that it's okay to write about one of those topics that people report are the typical essay topics, if you will. But to be certain to speak about whatever the issue is for 10% of the time and then talk about yourself, your reflection, the grit, what you had to overcome the rest of the time. So what's reported is that a lot of times people will speak about, the injury and forget to reflect on how it made them better, if you will, right? So what about now? How did it help to shape who you are now is what I'm told. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I've never heard that percentage breakdown, but I love it. And I myself have a senior in high school right now, and he's working on all kinds of essays for scholarships. And I love that because you're so right. Oftentimes, if it's more about the experience that happened and less about, okay, what are you going to do about it? Or how has this shifted your thought about something? Or how has it shaped what you want to do when you get older? I love the stories. Of course, I hate a sports injury, but when that turns into a student finding a passion for working in the health field, that's incredible. And then you can see how they just sort of build from what was a terrible event to something that could then maybe be a lasting impact for them.
Yeah, definitely making a positive out of that negative. And of course, another piece, I don't know if you ever heard of this, Heather, it's something called standardized test.
Yes.
Now, I know with CSU being test optional, what advice would you give students about whether or not to submit standardized test scores? And when scores are submitted, how does your team factor them into your overall evaluation?
Definitely. Ugh, I love being asked this question. This is a hot topic for me. And part of the reason it's so hot for me is because I just want the opportunity to share advice to students and families because I really think that we have complicated it for students and families. And by becoming test optional, I believe in test optional and I love that CSU is test optional. But I think even that term causes some immediate confusion for students and families. And then it turns back on them to then make this decision. Do I submit? Do I not submit? When should I submit? How should I submit? So thank you for asking the question. This could be a whole other podcast. So I'll talk about for CSU specifically. So Colorado State University and all of the other public institutions in the state of Colorado became test optional in 2021. We were already wanting to head in that direction because we had spent a lot of time with our own institutional research folks, and we were looking at, what are the factors that indicate a student's likelihood of being successful at CSU, and test scores weren't at the top of that list. We saw there were other things. And so we were wanting to head in that direction. The state went in that direction, which was great. So by law, by definition, we are test optional. By practice, we really are choosing to be test-free. We don't use the tests as part of the admissions process. We don't use as part of the scholarshiping or financial aid or even placement. So if a student wants to submit their test scores, that's great. There's a place for them to do it. It will be within their application review, but it won't factor, and it definitely won't factor in a negative way. The only way it can factor in is positively for them. So that's how we handle it at CSU. My advice as it relates to being test optional and just as students and families are going through this process is I'll always say, ask the school, find out how they're going to use the tests if they are test optional and get that middle 50%. See where you fall within that middle 50% to decide if you want to submit them and then find out how they're going to use them. Because even if a school doesn't use it for admissions, they might for scholarship purposes. And so that's where I think it can get really confusing. And why I love this podcast, it gives you a chance for students to find out from other schools how they'll handle it, but reach out to the admissions office and ask that question.
Well, I appreciate you turning the question to a more general conversation, right? In other words, families, if you have that in mind, like, should I submit? How do you evaluate the test score or not? As Heather said, don't be shy to ask the questions when you meet the admissions rep. Now, another thing that we learned on the podcast episodes is this thing called institutional priorities, which we touched upon briefly in a few questions ago. And the number one institutional priority is basically the number of students that you want to enroll in your classes. So, Heather, can you share a snapshot of your enrollment goals for the incoming class, the volume of applications you typically receive, and How does goals influence your admission strategies?
Sure, definitely. Yes. So at CSU, we are hoping to enroll an incoming first year class of about 5,550 students. That would be our largest incoming first year class by about 100 or so. So we sort of are kind of hovering in that 54 to 5,500 students in our incoming first year class. And that number really is coming from kind of a combination of a lot of things. Certainly capacity on campus. So we work with our partners in housing and course capacity and really get a sense of how many students can we handle here at CSU. And then it also fits into the overall student enrollment. So what's our retention rate? How does that fit into the overall population of students? And then this sort of continuous growth that we've wanted to have here on our campus. So we get that number, and then we do a lot of sort of backing that up based on historical context. So we've got this amazing data analyst in our office who helps us sort of shape, okay, if we want to get here, what do we have to do to get there? And so that typically starts with an applicant pool of close to 40,000 total. What we have seen, and I'm sure you all are hearing this on the podcast and experiencing it maybe yourself, that a lot of schools continue to see this growth in applications. So students are applying to more schools. We have benefited from that, where we're definitely seeing more and more applications, but that makes the competition a little bit more tough. And so we want those additional applications, but then we're really focused on how we're yielding those students. I talked a lot about being a land-grant institution and what that's meant for us from an access perspective. It's one of the things I love about talking about the Office of Admissions is that we are looking to admit students. So our admit rate sort of hovers around 87 to 88%, which I'm super proud of. I love that part of our process. And so you can kind of do the math from there, number of applications that we get, how many students we admit, and then we work on converting those students that have been admitted to CSU to get them to enroll. Now, our institutional goals, I talked a little bit about sort of that balance of serving the state of Colorado and wanting to be the top place for Colorado students to go to, and then also sort of combining that with our non-resident markets. As colleges and universities, especially public institutions, have to be less reliant on funding from the government, we really have to rely more on net tuition revenue for our students. And so that's where our non-resident market really comes into play. So again, balancing that Colorado with our non-resident and being in certain markets across the country that have a higher interest in the state of Colorado.
Hey, podcast friends, if you've been enjoying the College Admissions Process podcast, I'm excited to share my new book, Straight from the Admissions Office, Insider Strategies for College Applications. It's packed with insights and tips from over 250 podcast episodes with admissions professionals designed to make the college process less overwhelming. Whether you're a student, parent, or college counselor, it's a valuable resource for navigating the admissions process. By grabbing a copy, you're also helping to support the podcast. The links are in the show notes. Thank you, and best wishes to all with the college admissions process. Well, those are great insights, Heather. I really appreciate it. And given those enrollment goals, how does CSU approach the waitlist decisions? In other words, what factors influence whether a student is admitted from the waitlist? And is there anything applicants can realistically do to improve their chances if they're on that waitlist?
Sure. So it's interesting because actually we don't have an official wait list. So we don't have a wait list process. But I wanted to talk about this a little bit because we do, as we're reviewing applications, we do hold students for additional grades. So it's sort of like a kind of wait list where students will get their application in the fall of their senior year. And we just want to see how that senior year is going. So we'll hold on to see seventh semester, if they're on a trimester, their first trimester grades. And so to me, when I'm talking with students and they're trying to decide, when do I apply? Do I apply early, regular decision? What are my chances of being admitted? Again, sort of thinking back to our admit rates, we've got a pretty high admit rate. So I advise students typically to submit their application at a time that they feel that their profile is sort of in its best shape. So if this is a student who maybe got off on a rough start to high school, but they've really made this comeback sophomore, junior, going into senior year, then maybe hold off and let us see how you're doing your senior year. So that's how we've sort of handled that, is that we rarely deny students in the fall unless it doesn't matter what happens, that student's profile is not going to improve, but we want to see how students are doing during their senior year. So I guess the advice there is no senioritis, don't let up, finish high school strong.
Well, those are great pieces of advice. And another thing that comes up a lot with families is the cost of enrollment, because affordability is often a top concern, right, for so many people out there. Beyond the mechanics of financial aid, how does CSU communicate the value of a CSU education? And what do you wish more families understood about weighing cost against long-term academic and even career outcomes?
Yes. Oh, this is a great question. There's a lot to talk about as it relates to affordability, and I think how students and families approach it. I I might answer your question in reverse because I keep thinking how important it is to let families know to think about it beyond just that first year. I think it's really important to think about what this investment looks like over the course of 4 years. And if it's a school that has a locked in tuition versus tuition that might change year to year, maybe get an understanding of what percent increase do students typically see year to year, and any sort of scholarships or financial aid packages that a student might receive their freshman year. What does that look like returning year to year? What are the requirements to maintain that year to year? I think that's one thing. It's we all sort of live in the now, and so you get that financial aid award, you're ready to make that decision, and I just would advise take a quick pause and think about what that looks like for 4 years or maybe even beyond. So that was one thing I wanted to say. Going back to the first part of your question, something that I think we do a really great job here at CSU is really trying to be as transparent as possible of total cost of attendance. What does it look like to be a student at CSU? We are really open about the scholarship model that we have. So you can go onto our website, you can see the type of academic profile and what sort of scholarship you can expect to receive automatically. So there's not a lot of secrets behind all of that. So even early on in the process, families can start to look and say, okay, the student has this type of a GPA. We can anticipate this type of a scholarship. All schools have some type of a net price calculator on their website. I definitely encourage families to use that. It's a really great tool. It's a really great way to find out those additional costs that go beyond just tuition and room and board, but things like books and transportation and sort of those other indirect costs that might come along. Something I'm really proud of what we do here at CSU is how we take care of our Colorado families, especially our high need Colorado families. We've got a real strong commitment to students, making CSU affordable for students. So I think that's one of the misconceptions about college is like, oh, I could never afford that. Well, ask the question, fill out the applications, submit the information. You just never quite know what you're going to get coming in. I think another challenge that a lot of us have is how to talk about the investment and the ROI on a college education. And a lot of times we're fighting not necessarily against another school, but just the whole maybe not even going to college. And so how can we best educate that return on investment and the opportunities that a student can have with a degree from Colorado State University? What sort of doors that's going to open for them from a career perspective, from an earning potential perspective, and so forth. So I think it's sort of this balance of giving the information and then also educating that investment.
Such great advice. Such great advice. Especially, I loved how you talked about don't just look at it in terms of financial aid for year one, right? So many of us live in the now, which is actually not a bad thing to do. But when it comes to financial aid, make sure that the package is in fact for 4 years, or ask, how is it going to change over the 4 years? And I'm also glad that you mentioned this thing called the net price calculator, which has come up in our conversations before. It's something that every college or university is mandated to have. But so many students and families, when I ask them, have you ever heard of the net price calculator as it relates to the college admissions process? It's astonishing how many people have never heard of it. And to your point, Heather, it's really a great tool, right? To inform, to give some more information, to really help students and families make a decision. Because the worst thing that could happen is a student really wants to go into whichever college or university it is. They get accepted only to find out that they can't afford it, right? That's not really good for anybody involved. So using that net price calculator is so important. And another thing that I talk to families about, because they'll ask me privately, regularly about these things called institutional priorities. And I say, don't be shy to ask. And so,
Uh-huh.
Heather, what institutional priorities are guiding admissions right now, such as first generation students, geographic diversity, or alignment with CSU's mission? And how do these priorities shape the composition of each coming class?
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. And I feel like, for the most part, institutional priorities tend to stay the same and they just sort of build off of that. So I've mentioned a couple of times being rooted in our land grant mission. That's an institutional priority that's been around since the beginning of time here at CSU, and it will never go away. And so it might shift a little bit, but at the end of the day, that's always going to be our primary focus. Student success is by far the number one priority at Colorado State University. Our president talks about it all of the time. And the way she talks about student success is kind of the whole student, academic, personal, social, you name it. And so our role, our responsibility is to recruit and enroll students to come to CSU and to be successful, to persist year after year, have an amazing experience, both extracurricular, co-curricular, academically, so forth, graduate, and then go on to do these amazing things, and then come back to the university. So it's sort of this like cycle that keeps going. So institutional priorities are around recruiting and enrolling a class that's going to be successful, helping them be successful through all of our student success metrics throughout their time here at CSU, maintaining, of course, the financial health of the institution, serving our state of Colorado, and then also global impact as well.
Well, we appreciate that. And I know, Heather, that you have met with hundreds, if not thousands, of students and families over the years. Looking back at your many interactions, what's a question you wish more students or parents would ask during the admissions process?
Ooh, I love this question. Um, okay. I I think a really important question is to ask someone, what else should I be looking at? Because I think that how students enter the admissions process will vary. Some students are real go-getters. They're looking at colleges and universities ninth grade, 10th grade year. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have that late bloomer senior in high school. It's like, oh, I think I want to look at college. And so wherever they are in the process, it is our role and responsibility to meet them where they're at. So I think for people to ask, what else? What else should I know? That helps us say, you should really connect with someone in the academic college. You should really visit campus. You should really submit that additional letter of recommendation. It gives us a chance to get to know the student a little bit better. And then for us to be able to give real life, sort of personalized advice for them based on where they are in the process.
Great insights. And this has been a phenomenal conversation, as I knew it would be. But Heather, is there a topic that I haven't asked about today or that simply didn't come up that you feel is important for families to know about CSU or, frankly, anything else related to college admissions?
All right. Yes. I feel like I should probably focus it on college admissions, but I really just want to talk about CSU. I had mentioned to John, I bleed green and gold. I love this institution, and I just want everyone to know about Colorado State University. I feel like in a lot of ways, we're sort of this little secret gem. And when people visit campus, they hear about CSU, they meet someone who's been at CSU, it's very rare that you don't hear something positive come out of that experience. We are located in just this amazing city of Fort Collins, Colorado. We have incredible academic programs available to students. We are a big school that has this kind of small school feel. We use this term on campus called Rams Take Care of Rams, and then another one, it's a little cheesy, but I love talking about it, and it's our Ramily. And we talk about this Ramily that exists on campus, and it truly is students and faculty and staff kind of across the board really looking out for one another. So this is a really special community. And what I'd like to offer is give us a chance, take a look and see what you learn about CSU.
Definitely give them a chance. And students throughout the whole college admissions process definitely have an open mind and try to enjoy it. As I have enjoyed this conversation, Heather, unfortunately, it does bring us to that last question, which is, what are your top three pieces of advice for students and their families getting ready for the college admissions process?
Okay. I'm wearing a couple hats right now because I mentioned my son's a senior in high school. So I'm going through this as a parent. And then I also, of course, it's my profession. I think my number one piece of advice is to enjoy and sort of embrace every step along the way, the good, the bad. And when I say good and bad, I mean like the not great news that a student might get. My son didn't get into one of his top choices, and that wasn't great. But we're like, let's take a moment, and this has a meaning. Let's embrace this. It's a data piece, and now we can move on to something else. So as much as possible to sort of enjoy and embrace each step along the way. Another piece of advice is to really take advantage of the colleges and universities that might be close to where someone's located. I think a lot of times if students are thinking, oh, I can't wait to get out of here. I want to go across the country. I want to go here. I want to go there. And not to say that not to say that a student needs to focus on attending a college or university close to home, but use that college or university to go on a tour. Get a sense of, do I like the idea of a big school or do I like the idea of a small school? Do I like the idea of visiting or being on a campus that's in a big city or a smaller community? So take advantage of the schools that are close by. And then finally, I think it's ask questions. There's really no such thing as a dumb question in this process. We as admissions professionals have heard a lot of questions, but that doesn't mean that the student or their family's question isn't important to them. And a lot of times, parents and family members might not want to ask a question, but chances are others in the room want the answer to that question as well. So take advantage of those of us that are in this profession and can share some insight, share some knowledge, and definitely ask those questions.
Definitely ask those questions. And if it weren't for great people like Heather and other people in admissions, the podcast would not be available to so many students and their families. And again, it's really just that. You are all admissions officers. You are there hopefully to admit students, but definitely to help each and every one of them. Heather, you are amazing, as I knew you would be. Thank you so much for coming on, and I hope to have you again in the future. You're awesome.
Oh, I'd love to come back. John, thank you so much. You asked great questions, and this population is so lucky to have you.
Well, I'm lucky to have you and the population that listens. It's been a lot of fun, and the only thing left to say to everyone out there, thank you all so much. Take care, and best wishes. Thank you for joining us on this episode of The CAP, the College Admissions Process Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please don't forget to tell a friend and follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. I am your host, John Durante, and I look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The CAP. Thank you for listening to the College Admissions Process Podcast presented by Prep Expert. Prep Expert offers live online SAT and ACT courses with the best score guarantees, instructors, and curriculum. Go to prepexpert.com to guarantee your child's success.